Can start? Okay, hello everyone. So thank you for coming at this dinner time. So my name is Sharon D. I'm a current assistant professor from Department of Civil Engineering and Engineering Mechanics at Columbia University. So like my research is more on transportation management. Like there's some link between energy and transportation, but I'm not an expert. So that's why we are honored to have three distinguished female experts today on this team. And so I want to mention this event is organized by the Center on Energy Policy from CEPA. And let me first quickly say that this event, like all of others organized by the center, is being webcast live. And the full video and the podcasting will be available on the websites and iTunes in coming days. And for those of you watching online, so as well as people here in the audience, so you can ask any question for the panelists at any time using the hashtag CGEP events and our Twitter handle at Columbia U Energy. So now let me introduce these three speakers today one by one. The one sits next to me. Her name is Robin Marquis, right? So she's a project manager on the Clean Transportation team at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA for short. So it's a public benefit corporation that has been advancing energy solutions and working to protect the environment since 1975. So Dr. Marquis oversees a broad portfolio of transportation projects and initiatives that includes policy research, product development and demonstration, and also statewide deployment related to electrical vehicles, public transportation, mobility management, and freight. So she got her bachelor degree in civil engineering and a master and a PhD in transportation and engineering at RPI. And while at RPI, so Dr. Marquis researched the impacts of curbside management strategies on driver behavior and congestion. So quite close to transportation related study. So the lady next to Robin is
Gökçin.
Goskin. Goshin, right? Goshin, yeah. Goshin Kavlak. Kavlak? Oh.
Yes.
Is a graduate researcher from MIT. So her interests are in building frameworks to analyze the scalability of renewable energy technologies, especially solar photovoltaics, or we call it PV. So her most recent work focuses on developing a mathematical model to understand the factors that have contributed to the dramatic cost reduction in solar PV panels in the past 30 years. So she received a Master of Environmental Science degree from Yale University and a bachelor degree in industrial engineering from Istanbul. So the third speaker we have today is Dr. Christina Lampe-Anerud. So she's renowned for her pioneering work in developing and commercializing lithium iron, did I pronounce it correctly? Batteries for portable electronics, electrical vehicles, and utilities. So she currently serves as the CEO of Cadenza Innovation Incorporation, so which is a company she founded in 2012. So Dr. Lampe-Anerud has her work has earned her numerous awards, including the recognition as a technology pioneer by the World Economic Forum, and she also has presented on batteries, energy storage, and clean tech worldwide, including at the TED talk and events hosted by the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, the United Nations, US DOT, APA-E, MIT, and many other events. So Dr. Leppi Anerud holds a PhD from Sweden, and she also had her postdoc study at MIT. So we have 2 MIT affiliates here. Okay, so after introducing each of them, I think before the panel discussion, so I want to say again that for those who are watching online and listening to the podcast, so my name is Sharon Di, and I'm here with 3 speakers today, Robin, Gokshin, and Christina. So now probably we are discussing the topic, which is the future of clean transportation technology. So we will have a conversation among the panelists, then open it up to questions from the audience in a bit. So for those here in person, please come to the microphone at that time when we open the time for the question. And for those watching online, again, you can use the hashtag CGEP events and our Twitter handle at Columbia U Energy to ask a question. Okay. So now, maybe let me hand the time to each speaker, and then you can briefly introduce yourself and what you are doing.
Move this a little closer in case. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Marquis. I work for NYSERDA, the State Energy Authority. I've been there about 2 years in July, and before that I was finishing my doctorate at RPI. They asked us to kind of give a little bit of, where did we come from, how did we get here today? So I actually started, when I was a kid, I was very, very interested in architecture. My whole life, I was going to be an architect. I wanted math and science, and I figured that was going to be the way to do it. So I went to a math and science high school, a magnet school in Maine, applied to RPI for the architecture program, got into it and realized this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. The math and science is really done by the engineers, and a lot more of the art on the architecture side, which you all probably know that and could have told me that when I was a child, but I had to figure it out for myself. But one thing that really caused me to gravitate towards transportation is it's sort of interacting with your built environment in a much larger scale. In a building, why did you take that particular hallway or staircase or door? Transportation is, how did you get here today? Did you take the subway? Did you drive? Did you take an Uber? Did you walk, bike? It's all about choices that you make, ingress and egress, And that's what caused me to get more into the behavior side of things. So I always tell people I'm kind of a social scientist masquerading as an engineer. I did a lot more of the why than timing the signals, grading the highways. I'm much more interested in the decisions that people make that are kind of atypical or not in terms of economics, a rational decision that they should be making. And kind of on the side of that, I did a lot of work at RPI on our sustainability, all the low-hanging fruit, coordinating across the portfolios. And at the time, there wasn't a designated sustainability office. So myself, with a handful of really passionate students and faculty, kind of were the de facto office and its staff. And so the work that I do at NYSERDA is a way to kind of bridge the two together. You can't really talk about transportation, especially now, without considering its impacts on the environment. So I really like that one of our main missions is reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the state of New York. So as mentioned in my bio, I work on a pretty broad portfolio. I know that things like the smart mobility and electric vehicles will probably come up a lot tonight, particularly because they're kind of where transportation intersects energy and our grid. And my work thus far at NYSERDA has been working on one of our product development solicitations. So, how do you, for startup companies, if they have this great idea, how do they get their product to market? And kind of intersecting with people in our organization that do just that. They are our tech to market advisors and help the businesses grow, and not necessarily just startups. Some of the medium and larger companies need help too, particularly when they take their technology and apply it in a new way. Maybe they aren't actually a transportation company, but their technology can kind of, their next customer is in the transportation field. So I think I'll pause there and just say, because I know my mom's watching, hi, Mom.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thanks, everyone, for coming. My name is Gökşin Kavlak. I'm a researcher at MIT in the Transic lab. Here today, I'm representing my lab. So I'm finishing up my PhD at MIT this summer. Previously, I was at Yale focusing on life cycle assessment, resource availability, and yeah, my recent work is on solar energy and how the costs of solar energy are going down over time. Yeah, so today I'll try to give the perspective of my research lab as well as my own perspective. So the main focus of our lab is evaluating the costs and environmental impacts of energy technologies to accelerate their improvement. So we evaluate various energy storage and conversion technologies for electricity and transportation. And there are two main components of our research. The first one is we do modeling and data analysis. So we analyze how technologies change over time and space to understand the determinants of improvement and also their environmental and economic impacts. And second, we inform technology development in laboratories and also in technology policy, again, to accelerate adoption and improvement. So I'll give 3 examples of from our recent projects to give you an idea about the work we do. The first one is solar energy. With a grant from Department of Energy, we are analyzing why the solar energy costs have come down dramatically in the last 30 years. We develop cost models and estimate the contribution of different technical factors, and also high-level mechanisms such as learning by doing, economies of scale, to the cost reduction. And we combine, in general, in our lab, we combine retrospective and prospective analyses to better understand what happened in the past and also to shed light onto the further potential improvements in the future. And the models we develop are applicable to not only PV or a specific technology, but in general to all technologies. And the second area I want to highlight is energy storage. So when we evaluate technologies, we think about the context they exist in. For example, the integration of renewables into the grid is an important issue, and energy storage can enable intermittent renewables to provide energy on demand, but cost reduction is needed. So we develop methods to compare energy storage technologies and set cost improvement targets. And we work on residential level or community level or large-scale stationary storage projects. And our transportation projects are other examples of where we consider the technology in the context they exist in. And in the transportation area, this is the physical infrastructure and also the social infrastructure. So we evaluate clean energy technologies in terms of how well they can satisfy travel demand and their environmental impacts and their potential for technological improvement. And by analyzing large data sets, we uncover patterns in driving patterns in the US and also patterns across different energy transportation technologies. So we are interested in transportation in our lab because the transportation sector accounts for 30% of energy use and emissions in the US, and most of this comes from personal travel. So battery electric vehicles can reduce the emissions and energy use, but there's this issue of range anxiety that's a significant barrier to large-scale adoption. So in our lab, we develop models to evaluate the battery electric vehicle range and adoption potential against traveler demand by looking at large-scale surveys that have millions of trips. So I'll just say a few findings from this research. For example, we find that a large percentage of the energy requirements of personal travel in the US can be actually met by current battery electric vehicles, such as Nissan Leaf. So to be specific, 87% of the days that vehicles are driven could be done by Nissan Leaf. So the remaining 13% has to be covered by conventional vehicles through car sharing or just having conventional vehicles. So quantifying these is important to set guidelines for improvement of battery electric vehicles, and also to quantifying these is important for improving the technologies also. And as the batteries improve, the range of the vehicles will improve, and they'll be able to cover longer trips. So this 87% number will go up. And looking at the environmental impacts, we see that there's no trade-off between low cost and low emissions for vehicles for the current fleet. Of course, this is when we consider life cycle costs, federal and state level tax refunds, and fuel savings over the lifetime of the vehicle. And finally, we found that even with the current US electricity mix, the current battery electric vehicle technologies are able to meet emission reduction targets for 2025 in the US, but for more ambitious targets for 2040, 2050, the grid has to be decarbonized. But for the 2025 target, even the current electricity mix is fine.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I'm Kristina Lampjanerud. From Sweden originally, grew up in a home of innovators. My father took ABB from 4% to 96% market share globally in high power transmission. Of course, I couldn't do high power, so I went to low power. Dedicated my world and my life to the worlds of chemistry and global relations, sustainability on every level, from economics to trade to supply chain to market innovation. I'm an innovator and an entrepreneur. Had a privilege of doing a postdoc at MIT, sit in the Royal Academies, World Economic Forum, United Nations, and spend most of my time below radar, however, in private companies. I was a global managing director for Arthur D. Little's Technology Innovation, where our practice was frankly touching the intersect of energy and water, which are very intricately tied. Most of my practice was 15-year outlooks, what happens in the different markets. We did a lot of M&A transactions, a lot of strategy, worked the whole value chain in fairly large Fortune 50 companies, but also advised the G7 countries on policy 50 years out. And then, of course, the bread and butter was paid by emergencies where very large multi-billion-dollar corporations overstate their claims and have problems and have to have 200 engineers go suddenly into a production line or help relaunch a marketing or whatever, define a product. In 2004, my group at Arthur D. Little had been part of the backbone of the US government in CPSC, the Consumer Safety Commission. And at that time, believe it or not, 20 million lithium-ion batteries were in recall. there were no skinny startups that were at the culprit. These were the Panasonic, Samsung, LG, Sony companies of the world, and they had to come at that time. I was living in Boston, to the Arthur D. Little labs basically for failure mode effect analysis, and we found 4 root causes. And I will share with you that when we were close to having 100 investigations, and the senior ranking executives had to be present for these findings to be presented, I took one of them aside and I said, I am so glad you're here and welcome back. But I'm curious, why are you here? You know the 4 root causes, and we know that these explosions are quite violent, and I don't understand. And this gentleman patted me on the head and said, Christina, it's very simple. It's just business. And I was like, oh yeah? It's just business? So if I have a cell phone and I put it in a 10-year-old's pocket in his shorts and I blow up his leg, is that just business to you? Or, sir, do you need to take down a plane of 400 people, 10 planes, 100 planes? When is this not business to you? And I was quite furious and very, very frustrated that day. And in spite of having had a quite plush life, I was a managing director, I had private jets, I did deals with bankers, it was really cool. I decided to start a company. So my family agreed, and we bootstrapped our private economics. I lived in an old house in Boston that had a carriage house, and I started a company called Boston Power. In that carriage house, with a mission to do true data, fastest charging, longest lasting, true green before it was cool to be green, and not hazardous or just be safe. And I took the liberty of defining safety as it can't have impact on the user. Sounds simple. 9 years, I was part of that company and grew it into 9 operating companies globally with global supply chains. First factory outside the Tiger Lake in China, then in Shenzhen. We had a factory in Taipei, and then we grew greenfields operations outside Shanghai. Before Elon Musk, I brought up a gigafactory, just saying. And the result was we did deliver. We actually cleaned up all the fluorohydrocarbons from the lithium-ion battery industry and supply chain, flew under radar and made that a standard. Pioneered eco-labeling, so government policy at its best helps consumers select environmentally friendly products when you want to. And we did that by putting really strict and stringent requirements to carry the labels in Europe. There was none in the United States, but also China was very interested, so shaped that labeling, basically for consumer electronics. Our first uptake, our first big customers was HP, who at the time was the #1 notebook computer maker in the world. And they said, we could have a laptop where the battery lasts as long as the laptop, meaning you own a laptop roughly for 3 years and you don't have to replace your battery. It was revolutionary at the time, and I'm proud to say I think Boston Power had an impact, this little scrappy US company, on global markets, because today this is no longer a big problem. But if you remember 2000, 2005, this was a big deal. If you wanted to work untethered in 2005, you bought a new laptop battery every 3 to 6 months. Big deal. We were quite closely followed then with the HP success with Lenovo and ASUS, and we had kind of made it as a US startup company next to the Panasonic, Sanyo, LG, Samsung, and Sony's. Was little Boston Power, qualified in global supply chain. We then went into medical markets, wearable technologies where you have implanted or outside the body most of the time. And then GM discovered us and put us into a trial program with the Saab 9.5, a big station wagon for 5 people. We have grocery space in the car, 200 kilometers on one charge, priced under $40,000. 2009, Paris Auto Show. My friends at NASDAQ ran the tower in Times Square, and it was a huge success. And when we met with the GM team afterwards, we thought they were going to say, oh, great job, here are the orders. And they said, great job, we have sold this model to China. And Beijing Auto is going to do the manufacturing. So overnight, our revenue went from west to east. And with that decision, I had to make a private decision. Did I want to raise my family in Beijing or kind of on the east coast of the US? I stayed and helped transition the company, and we set up a new technology center in Beijing and basically substantiated the work that we had started in China. Boston Power is doing quite well and is in over 30 different brands in China. for electric drive. Everything that is like super luxurious and CEO cars. If you've been to Beijing and other big cities, there's a lot of congestion and a lot of meetings happen in very large vehicles, personal vehicles, all the way down to scrappy garbage trucks and school buses, maybe not as sexy, or cool buses, whatever, but actually made a difference. When then being kind of done with that, standing on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean, seeing the company sail off to Beijing and Asian markets overall, I got a call from the biggest hedge fund in the world to have a chance to work in analytics, Bridgewater, and learned a little bit of the impact when we make a policy decision, what happens then to macroeconomics. And then again, my interest in energy and basically contrasting that to assets like gold and raw minerals and just trends in general, made me quite inspired to basically step back into the innovation space. And I had, prior to joining Bridgewater in the senior management ranks, started a company that was basically a squirrel works, kind of skunk works on this idea. Could I package 20 years of experience, so lithium-ion has been around since 1991, put best practices into a Lego block, which is a TED talk that you referenced. My dream, can you make it so simple, drive cost out, and just package this, a large Lego block to really conquer the electricity game, which is really in grid and transport. And the trials worked out, and after my 18 months at Bridgewater, I went back into running this company, which is now Cadenza Innovation, which basically pioneers this very interesting opportunity. So lithium-ion batteries is the dominating battery technology for storage, both for transport and for global storage. Made in just one format, 7 billion cells were made last year. You can procure these from 100 factories globally. One very large one now in the United States with Tesla, the rest in Asia, the majority in China. The quality has gone up. Six Sigma manufacturing is well known and understood. So you could basically procure the electrochemistry part now from 100 companies. Our innovation is to basically use those roles and very much know how to tweak the chemistry so you get high power or high energy, or a little bit of both, to mix and match and put them into like an egg carton. Think of an egg carton, and the energy rolls are eggs. And this egg carton is formed by ceramic, so refractory, non-combustible ceramic materials filled with your commonly used fire elimination materials, what you see in the extinguishers, and insulation fibers. So if one of my little eggs has an issue, not only does the issue stay within that confined area, but the fire retardants just knock out that event. So it self-selects out. And then that cell basically has no, what is called in the industry, thermal runaway. So there's no progression of heat. And we have taken that into a casing of aluminum, so much better heat transfer than you see in the steels, carbon steels that is typically used. And we can make it super thin. Think of a Coke can with pressure vents and all the bells and whistles of thin aluminum canisters, hermetically sealed, satisfied lithium-ion that hates water. And it's a Lego block, a really big one. The Japanese have now named it the Cadenza Supercell, and it sits right in between the space of traditional portable power that pioneers the way for transportation, which in turn pioneers the way for grid applications and storage, and the applications. A very, very simple Lego block. And I'm so grateful to be here today at Columbia and be part of this discussion today. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting next 10 years that we have ahead of us. Thanks.
Great. So we heard three lively stories from each speaker. So now we will move on to the panel discussion. So before that, again, for those watching online and listening to the podcast, so I'm Sharon Di, and we are discussing the future of clean energy transportation. And I'm here with three panelists. So from left to right, Christina, Gokshin, and Robin. basically, we will have a conversation among the panelists, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience in a bit. So we have a bunch of questions ready for the panelists. The first question I want to ask is, actually, Gokshin mentioned that transportation is a major source of the emission and also the greenhouse the gas pollution. When we talk about the clean transportation technology, the first thing come to our mind probably is the electric vehicles, and we think it's clean. So Bloomberg new energy finance experts, so they basically predict that electric vehicles will present 35% of the new car sales globally by 2040. So I would love to hear your opinion from the technology perspective on how ready are we to achieve this, and what are the major roadblocks in achieving this. So maybe we can start from Robin.
Okay. I mean, I guess the intro from Christina kind of said a lot about the state of technology. It's progressing pretty rapidly. We're already at a stage where vehicles have much larger range than they did. We're kind of, here in the Northeast, having to unlearn some of the lessons from California. We're at a state that they were maybe 5-6 years ago, where the first generation of these vehicles had a very short range, and people were trying to figure out, how do I get around, where do I charge? And now the vehicles are, I mean, then they were about 80-mile range. The Bolt is 238. So it's come a long way. On the charging side, however, there still is some room to grow in terms of the fast charge. There are DC fast chargers right now that can fully charge in about 20 to 30 minutes. But speaking to some of the barriers, a lot of the reasons why people are hesitant to get an electric vehicle, and a truly battery electric versus a plug-in hybrid, is that if they're on the go and they're not just charging overnight, or maybe they are a garage orphan, they don't have a place to charge at home, they want to be able to spend the same amount of time as if they're filling up their gas tank. So I get a lot of questions of, when can I charge in 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. And that's when I think we'll see a lot larger adoption. However, I do think that the current technology is pretty close to it really just breaking open the market. And a lot of the challenge that particularly NYSERDA addresses is the education and outreach component, getting people to understand these vehicles are out there. We, about a month ago, launched the New York State Drive Clean rebate, and there are 30 vehicle models that are eligible for that, including plug-in hybrids, and up to $2,000 off your purchase price at point of sale. It's not a tax incentive, it just automatically comes off the vehicle. So before people actually get in and say, I'm committed to the Leaf or the Bolt or whatever model it is, they first need to understand electric vehicles exist, where can they charge it, that it's not some spaceship, it's just like your normal car. They're actually really fun to drive. They have a little bit more pickup than a traditional internal combustion engine. And that they don't necessarily need to totally change their lifestyles to integrate it in there. So it's a lot about the messaging and, as I mentioned in the beginning, kind of breaking some of what they may have heard from the previous generation of these vehicles.
I agree with Robin's comments. I think that, we need to achieve 35% adoption or even higher if we want to achieve the emission reduction targets. Decarbonization of transportation is necessary, and the way to do it is electrification. So we know that. I'll just address a few other issues as we scale up the adoption of electric vehicles. So as the number of vehicles in the grid in the transportation network increases, so there might be problems about the peaking demand when these vehicles charge. So maybe we can start thinking about the coordination of these vehicles so that there isn't peaks in the demand that has to be met by dirty or peaking power. So this coordination can be through regulation or time of use pricing. So people can look at the price and decide when to charge their vehicles, for example. So that's an issue to think about as the scale of electric vehicles go up. Also, again, another systems level issue is that as the electricity gets cheaper and electric vehicles get cheaper, this might encourage people to just drive more. So this can increase the miles traveled, and this is called the rebound effect. So that can sort of eliminate the gains that we are having by improving our transportation system. So, and this increased travel can also cause increasing sprawl, which might be more energy intensive. So if we build more structures around the cities, because we can travel further cheaper, so that can actually increase our emissions. So these are the systems level issues we can think about. And another system level issue is raw materials availability. If we increase the adoption of electric vehicles, we have to think about the availability of materials, raw materials that are used in permanent magnets or batteries that are used in these vehicles. For example, neodymium in permanent magnets and lithium and cobalt in batteries are materials that are rare or produced as byproducts of other metals. So we need to think about whether we have enough reserves, but more than that, we also need to think about whether we can scale up the production of these materials as fast as we want. For example, for cobalt and lithium, this might be an issue, although the reserves seem to be enough for large-scale production.
Great. So I think we have a choice, and I'll change your question a little bit to say the technology has been available for some time. It's just the price point that hasn't been. The other thing that hasn't been consistent is how we think about policy, especially in the United States, versus what the consumer voice is. The consumer is early, very few know, so it's true. Once you try driving an electric car, you have a different perception of what that means. We know from trials it takes 3 days. When you have a big display in front of you, you modify your behavior. You get instant feedback. Just like if some of you have solar on your house, you probably have it now on your phone. It's like today I generated 72 kilowatt hours, so that's cool. It's a good day, and I'm proud of that, and I feel good about that because I paid no electricity, I paid it into the grid. Just like that, once you have the feedback and the information, you make different decisions. So I think the biggest opportunity we have right now, if we look at technology history in general, we have consistently underestimated impact in the long run, all the time. We can consistently, and you see that in the VC industry, all the VC money went into this industry between 2000 and 2007, roughly. Too early. It's happening now. Why? Because the prices are coming down. So the offering that this little startup company is saying, basically, we can produce lithium-ion batteries $125 a kilowatt hour. This is on par with fossil fuels. Discussion is over when that hits scale. When we get on par on cost, so if your car is $35,000 and you can drive, and we can debate how long you really need, because I agree with the findings that you have found, 87% is roughly short time. Most of the cars are in parking lots most of the time. And if we can accept that we either have a bigger battery, in which maybe we even trade part of that energy. Maybe we power our house. Maybe we take our energy with us, and we're responsible for our transportation, and we power part of our office, and we trade in the house, and maybe we actually get to actually run all our appliances at night when it's cheap. If you have that differentiated scale, you'll see a different behavior. But even before that, because electric cars are slightly more convenient than petrol-fueled cars, if you have access to charging, you charge overnight, Cell phones have already trained us to do that. Every night we plug them in. This was not hard. And every day we have a fully charged vehicle with predictable mileage. And you can always have a reserve on how much you want to have, even if you trade back to the net or to the facilities that you're working in. So with a big battery in the car, you not only have the range, but you have low impact. So you get now life extension because the drive and the need from the technology is much less than if you have high power and a short range. So I think we're at the point right now where technology is not the limitation. Cost will very soon be at a price point on par with the fossil fuel paradigm. So the question is, and frankly why I'm here today, is going to be policy. Where do we deploy first? In the United States, there are a lot of people who are very interested in seeing this type of technology come through. There are many people who are very concerned about climate change and want to put their money where their vision and their minds are, but can't afford it. Once they can afford it, will they do it? Probably. If you have policy like the CAFE standards that basically put the big car companies on notice, we are going to require this or that, you have more innovation power. China is doing it. Europe is doing it. My only big question is, what are we going to do in the United States? Will we again see the innovators have no choice but to go to Asia to actually make fruitful connections and real businesses? And I've done this once, and I really hope for this innovation because I think this is at least my best invention to life. Can it stay here? Can it basically blossom here? Can we deploy it here? It's a global play, but can the United States at least be part of this? Or am I again going to move a company to China? That's the question.
Yeah, great, thank you. So basically for the second question is, so we talk about a lot about the electrical vehicles, but because I work on transportation more like travel behavior, so how people travel and how they adapt their travel behavior to some technology. So I'm very interested in, like there are many other clean transportation technology solutions. For example, technology that improve the efficiency in public transportation, and some app technologies that can optimize travel and minimize travel energy use. Or we have even some transportation demand management, so which will shift people travel demand in time and space. So and so on. I think Gokshin mentioned about like one project they were doing in their lab is about the energy range, storage and range. So how the large-scale adoption of EV will impact people's travel behavior and the other way around. And I think Robin also touched upon the link between the transportation and energy. So like now, I want you guys to share like with us some of these technologies in transportation sector that you think have great potential in the near future. So maybe we can start from Gokshin.
Sure. So yeah, new solutions that leverage social media and also our increased capability of getting data from smartphone apps, and also increased capability of analyzing data, large-scale data, can have a potential. So we actually have a new project, other than the ones that I mentioned. We have a new project that aims to influence travelers' behaviors by providing them with information and also incentives to change their behavior, and also optimize system performance. So this involves simulations of the transportation network. This will happen in Boston, and also modeling the environmental and energy impacts of the travel choices travelers are choosing. So the travelers will get information on the energy and environmental impacts of the modes of transport, time of departure, so these kinds of choices, and they can change their behavior based on that. So this is a new project that's starting. So the overarching goal is to basically optimize the system performance, which includes environmental impacts, and also provide governments with a tool to come up with standards that can help them improve systems performance.
Great. I think this is a trend, like even for transportation researchers, now we are thinking how we incentivize people to change their behavior so that we can optimize the system performance. And definitely energy is one important part of it. Yeah, how about Robbie?
I agree that leveraging data and turning that into useful apps is a pretty natural progression from the other data-driven, larger picture technologies that we discuss, particularly something like electric vehicles. So one of the primary motivators for me to step back out of academia and work for an organization like NYSERDA is that I have a very, very broad portfolio of projects. And I'm able to then kind of see what's out there that I maybe never would have heard of because I was so deep into my own work. So speaking at our major focus areas, electric vehicles, public transit, and mobility management, there's a huge potential to reduce energy usage from public transit, particularly electrified rail. So in New York State, there's one particular entity that has a very large electrified rail system that shall remain nameless. And they use, surprise, surprise, a ton of electricity. So ways to help them shed some of that load, particularly during peak. A lot of the trains are outfitted with regenerative braking capabilities, but there aren't necessarily always ways to store the energy that's generated. So we're looking at new wayside, trackside energy storage, so looking at batteries and ultracapacitor systems, lightweighting the rail cars themselves. If they don't weigh as much, you don't need as much energy to move them. Working with a company that is replacing some of what's previously an iron core and is now an air core and taking out, I believe, 700 to 800 pounds per car. Looking at traveler behavior, and particularly in large urban settings, we funded a company that called Bandwagon that's available at JFK and LaGuardia and some other large transportation hubs. And it's kind of like the Uber for taxis. You can sign up for this and say, okay, I'm okay sharing my ride with someone. And everyone always queues up for the taxi line. And then they say, oh, if you sign up and use Bandwagon, you want to be matched with someone, you jump the queue and then split the fare and split the ride. So there's cost implications for you. It's cheaper and it's greener. And the app then kind of shows you, you've offset this much by agreeing to share this ride. So it's sort of putting some of the rides back in the hands of the yellow cabs, kind of working in this complex regulatory tensions that have been going on between the services. And a lot of information can be gained from just roadside sensors. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the new Link NYC. All the old phone booths are gone, and now there's this Wi-Fi pedestal, and you can dial 911, you can charge your phone, you can figure out where you're going, and it's actually a Google spinoff that introduced those, but they are kind of leading the way in smart cities technologies, working with all the cities that applied for that big federal grant. And ultimately, something like that, if you replace an old street light in the same footprint, GE and other companies have these bulbs and sensors that now become smart parking. You could see where cars are parked and automatically say, this one's free, or you're over your time limit. Resiliency, figures out the weather, gunshot detection, all these things, and it's just from the same exact footprint that was already there. So I think, there's an acronym that DRIP. You could be data rich but information poor. So the trick is we're getting all these sensory inputs. What do we do with it? So I'm a huge advocate for open source. Give it to the people. Let them do something with it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I think we should also take a moment to acknowledge the work that NYSERDA is doing. This is a super initiative. I am so impressed, and I'm also participating in some of the studies and also the work that DOE has done. the stimulation that these agencies put out cannot be understated at all. It is really, really critical that these crazy ideas, when innovators and people who like to think outside the box get a chance to try something, the private market will never fund it. Never. Because you have no quals, you have no customer, you can't prove that the market will do it. We got to try it and we got to develop the data, and I think that's really, really critical. So that's huge.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so actually, I want to add something. So DOE, APAE, they started a new a track last year. Basically, they want to work with transportation problems and try to incentivize drivers to develop some app so that it can tell people when to use the car, when to share. So we can see basically DOE is also very interested in work on some DOT related problems. So that's very closely related to the question we just discussed. Yeah, the next question is related to this funding. So DOE is one, APAE is one big funding source, and actually NASED, so how to say that?
NYSERDA.
NYSERDA actually is also another funding agency which gave grants to clean transportation technology companies or projects every year. So we have Robin from the Clean Transportation Program, and also both Christina and also Goxin's colleagues at MIT received funding from APAE. So can you share a little about the funding process? And for those who are interested in seeking funding for their clean transportation projects or companies, so what kind of advice would you give? Yeah, maybe we can start from Christina. So you have a lot of experience.
I do. I raised for Boston Power, just as a reference. I had no government money whatsoever. I raised $360 million to build a couple of factories and staff the company and basically get it onto a good path. 250 of that was private equity. The rest was low-cost loans from the Chinese government. As the US and Europe tanked in recession, the US opened up a big stimulus opportunity in this particular field, close to $2 billion. I put in a bid for $100 million and didn't get it. And I think it was because my cover letter said, wonderful opportunity, I have reoccurring revenue. You can bet on me because this is a good investment for taxpayers. However, I don't think the electric transport market is available in the United States until 2015. And I got the word I was not aggressive enough. So that's life. I was thrilled when I stepped down from Boston Power as CEO and basically served as chairman for 1 year to get a call from DOE and said, we're sorry, we should have potentially have bet on you. And we were wondering if you would consider applying. And I said, well, my track record is about 0, so I'm not sure. What do you think? And they took a very different approach through ARPA-E. They actually had a discussion a little bit what they were thinking, so we knew what we were applying into. And our idea of driving cost was very much aligned with ARPA-E's at the time. And this is where DOE, again, had a huge impact. So when it's done right from the government policy side, they said, can you meet $125 per kilowatt hour? We said, we think so. They said, if you can, you will have a chance to prove that. Nobody will believe you, which is true. We took on almost $5 million from ARPA-E. I took a team that was very, very experienced. Most of us had done pretty well in life before. I was the main angel, and none of us took salary. There are only a few times in your life when you can do that, but we were able to do it at that time, and ARPA-E was critical for us. And on the heels of that, NYSERDA got very interested because their success was basically with Fiat Chrysler, who was a champion, and then ABB came in and said, this is remarkable. So you can get interest from private markets and ultimately the market forces that will shape and enable the opportunity, but the work that ARPA-E and DOE and also NYSERDA did to say, let us help you validate the first, was really remarkably important. Having an ARPA-E grant, working with DOE is a lot of work. However, there are quarterly reviews and there's a lot of bureaucracy in how you get paid. At times we had to float quite a bit of cash. NYSERDA prides itself on paying the bills early, and I testify it's true. It's a wonderful accomplishment in the state of New York, so great job.
Yeah, thank you. I can also testify it. So basically, getting the funding from DOE is very competitive, and once you get it, it's a lot of commitment.
Yes.
Yeah. But you will feel fulfilled, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe the next, Goxie.
Yeah, so in our lab, we have funding mainly from DOE, ARPA-E, and also companies and foundations. So we maintain a portfolio of funding sources. So this is to fund our research in different areas and also to connect with the stakeholders that are related to these research areas. So the DOE funding we got was for solar energy. We got a new DOE funding for that. And we got ARPA-E funding for the project that I just mentioned that aims to change traveler behavior through apps. And for ARPA-E, so the way when we apply to these grants, so our angle is we support clean energy technology development. But I think ARPA-E also can emphasize energy efficiency or energy independence, but we approach it from clean energy development angle. But we have, because we do all kinds of research, not transportation, so we have different funding sources. And for companies, we try to make sure that we agree on terms such as our freedom of research, no conflicts of interest, and we try to work on issues that are of interest to us and also to the companies such as Ford. We got funding from Ford recently, for example.
All right, so I'm on the we give out money side of this. But I mean, there is obviously a process involved in even before you see the opportunity on the streets. We do a lot of work on the back end of developing our programs. So a lot of our funding opportunities you may have heard like RFPs. We have PONs, Program Opportunity Notice. So we'll have some sort of program, whether it's one of the focus areas that I mentioned, or it's a cross-cutting general product development, everything from technical feasibility up through the validation testing. So we'll do a lot of stakeholder outreach, or we might hear from some of our partners like the MTA in the city, state DOT, other state agencies. Hey, we really have X issue, and NYSERDA is the right one to fund these small companies, this new technology, or there might be something that's commercially available elsewhere. And for whatever reason, whether it's regulatory or there's some sort of market conditions that are different in New York State, has not yet been adopted in the state. So my program historically has had at least 2 annual PONs, one focused on the product development and the other on this underutilized already commercial technology. And then we tend to have others that are specifically focused on expanding the electric vehicle market or getting electric buses in people's hands. It kind of really depends on what people are saying to us. This would be hugely beneficial if you would fund some of these technologies. And the transportation team at NYSERDA is a little bit unique in that the other programs in the innovation portfolio kind of have their R&D side of the hall and then their market side of the hall. And in transportation, we're fully integrated. So we have seen products come in from development to a demo to large-scale deployments, and that's really cool to see it progress through. So when we have this idea for a program, it comes with all these evaluation criteria. There's a panel of people that will evaluate based on what we say. You know, we're looking for it to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, spur economic development in New York State, because we are a state agency. So it's in terms of how could you maybe get funding from us, partner with someone in New York if you're not in New York, prove that it's going to benefit us, not just pay for you to develop a battery in Indiana or wherever the case is, but we really stick to that, and it's always very clear, you know, this is what we're looking for and how we're evaluating it. And also very much looking not just at the technical, but the go-to-market plan. What's the value proposition of your product or service or new business model? Who's the first customer? And a lot of our programs tend to be due date. All applications are due April 20th. But we do have a few that are kind of catch-alls revolving, and those are much more competitive because could be anything and everything. So, it could be a big company diversifying or the crazy guy in his garage that has the next big thing, and we do get a lot of those calls. But I guess the biggest piece of advice is pay attention to the evaluation criteria.
Great. So the next question is a little sensitive. So given the current market and the political environment, for example, like a low oil price and a rollback of CAF standards, for example, so what would be your views of the outlook of clean transportation technology development in the United States? So maybe we can, from Christina again.
Sure. There's no question we will electrify transport. There is, however, a big question where the United States will take a lead. We have the leading technologists and the engineers and potentially the entrepreneurs to do this. But we will also, as entrepreneurs, find the simplest market. If it's too complicated to operate in the United States, we will move our companies. We have no choice, because it's as much work to land an order of 10,000 vehicles as it is 1 million. And we don't survive as companies on 10,000 vehicles. So I think we are basically indecisive right now. That's not good. I think it's really hard to get capital because we're indecisive. That's not good. And I think yet there are many entrepreneurs that have serial successes that are trying really, really hard and will sustain for the next couple of years. So if we can mobilize, the United States will, no question, be a leader. And if not, we will still be a player. This is a really big country with a lot of willpower. And once we decide to do something, I believe we can do it. I participated, and I failed to mention during a different comment, I also participated in World Economic Forum's transport evaluation. And one of the outcomes is, of course, the change in economics. So once you have a buying fleet opportunity, it shifts basically the purchase price, which is another way to look at it, and enables, of course, a different opportunity and a different buying group to get in. And I think that's another thing where policy can come in very strongly, actually, and encourage buying patterns.
So maybe, Gokshi.
Yeah, so from the manufacturer's perspective, so electric vehicle costs are coming down, so this is good. And we think that the car manufacturers in the US are going to continue offering battery electric vehicles because manufacturers, although the oil prices are low now, they can't really assume that it will stay low forever. And there's demand for electric vehicles in the US and also elsewhere in the world. So policies in one country hopefully is not the only determinant for the manufacturer. So they'll continue producing electric vehicles. And from the policy side, so there are still state-level policies other than the CAFE. So there's zero-emission vehicle in California and
New York.
And yeah, 10 other states. Yeah, I was going to mention. And yeah, New York and 9 other states participate. So that makes up about 30% of the market in the US. And these states aim to achieve 15% of electric, low carbon emission vehicles by 2025. So that's still a good sign. So state level policies hopefully can be more effective. And maybe in California or in other states, this can create markets like more local but more intensive markets. Oh, and also one more thing. But yeah, if the consumer subsidies, if the refunds for electric vehicles are removed, so this will probably affect the demand for electric vehicles. So that's a tricky issue.
So I agree that a lot of the states will have to step up, and fortunately I work in and for a state that's pretty progressive and aggressive, particularly in clean transportation and zero-emission vehicles. I think although I work directly for the state, we do a lot, we collaborate a lot with other states like the multi-state ZEV group and Clean Corridors, so targeting the major highways in the Northeast. And we've discussed this because we deal with people who work for the EPA or other federal agencies that are scared and wondering, you know, are they going to have jobs? And if they do, what are they going to be doing? And what should they be talking about in the hallways? And I think one of the better discussions that we had was it's not that these types of technologies won't continue to flourish and the markets won't grow, but it's potentially about shifting the value proposition. So instead of saying it's clean or it's green, what other benefits are there? Could you save money? Does it increase your efficiency? Could you stimulate economic growth? So presenting the exact same products or services in a different way may speak to those people who are in a position to unlock the funding for those types of technologies.
Okay. So great. Thank you for all the answers. And now, because we are running a little bit late, so we just move to the Q&A session. And so for those who are in this room, you can raise your hand. So maybe that's... Yeah, okay, great.
Oh, yeah, thanks. My name is Ahmad. I'm first year student here at SIPA. I guess my first question is, so far we only talked about land transportation, but we also have marine and aviation. And my question is that, are we going to see an electrified marine and aviation transportation, or will we see advanced biofuels play a role in the future of this renewable transportation? And my second question is, I know in terms of land transportation, electric cars have been receiving a lot of hype, but what about hydrogen cars? I know they start a little bit late compared to the electric vehicle, but currently the Japanese and Koreans, they are developing the hydrogen cars, and they could probably create something that could potentially compete with electric vehicles. So I think I'm directing my question to any of you. Thank you.
I'll start and take the second question first. So there are, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that exist. We saw a few at the auto show. The biggest barrier, and it's an issue with battery electric vehicles as well, is the infrastructure. And for hydrogen is astronomically more expensive, and certain policies or agenda items have kind of pushed more so for the battery electric and plug-in hybrid market. It will be a much bigger lift to have enough fueling infrastructure for there to be a larger scale fuel cell vehicle market. And the vehicles themselves are still quite expensive, even compared to battery electric and plug-in hybrid. And for that reason, the limited OEMs that do have these available, Toyota is one, they have the Mirai, I think it's called. They offer, just to kind of incentivize people to buy them, 3 years of free fueling up to a certain amount, but obviously only in the California market where there are actually fueling stations for this. So I'm not saying we'll never get to a point where they're more integrated into the vehicle, our everyday use. It's just we're starting at a much different baseline than we are with battery, electric, and plug-in hybrids.
I can try to address the first part. So I'm aware that some biofuels have been tested for aviation, but the general idea in our group, and especially people who work on transportation in my group, is that so it's harder to electrify or use alternative fuels, transition to alternative fuels in marine and aviation, so other modes of transport. So that's why they want to focus on more on land transportation. So for one, but yeah, we know from emissions inventories that marine transportation is a big source of emissions, and they have a separate category in the emissions inventories because they don't necessarily belong to any country's emissions. So that's kind of a gray area, and someone needs to take responsibility for that. But we believe that it's gonna come later, at least after land transportation.
So, Christina, do you
Yeah,
want
very
to add one?
simply, the energy density in fossil fuels is very high. So hotel loads, absolutely, meaning lights, heating, basically on-the-ground operations of airplanes will be battery electric. The propulsion will not be for quite some time. And I think it's very important, actually, when we look at technologies and when we think about how we shape the future energy markets, that we stay realistic. The grid as we know it will not go away. The solution that we need to provide for is peak. Energy plants are not good at shifting up and down, and we pollute the environment very, very heavily when we do. Airplane transportation, it's very easy to solve on-the-ground operations, the same as when you come into the marinas. You can basically control where you emit and how you do that. So I think that's a simpler solution. On fuel cells, Panasonic said it in 1995. It requires magic to make that work because it's a cost-prohibitive technology for mass markets. There are specialty markets, and I've been part of some of the operations that require very, very highly specialized deployed military operations, for example, where fuel cells are great as a mule, a charging station, semi-stationary, all that stuff, which is very specialized. But for mainstream, cost will dominate. Cost and ease of adoption will dominate. And the lithium-ion battery technology, with all the successes of portable power, will take it, no question, for the next 30 to 50 years. It takes a really, really long time.
Okay, before moving, let me say something. So for those who are watching online, don't feel left out. So you can also ask questions using the hashtag #CGEP events and our Twitter handle at Columbia Energy. Okay, so next, maybe I think that gentleman, yeah, you.
My name is Judah Aber. I'm interested in battery electric buses, and I know that from a transit perspective, the technology is there, but it's only still in its infancy relative to rollout. So I'd be curious as to, from an incentive perspective, what we might be able to do with that, and from a technology perspective, where do you think it's going to go?
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, one of our major focus areas is public transit. I spoke earlier more so about the electrified rail part of that, but obviously the rest of the state doesn't have that system. So we do have programs that are focusing on shifting the buses that they use to battery electric. I know that New York City Transit has been and continues to pilot certain technologies and kind of is getting a feel for what's out there, the different manufacturers. I think they've bid out for a handful of them and are going to be starting the actual trial soon. They have previously deployed some hybrid buses that NYSERDA actually paid for the initial development of the technology like 20-something years ago. And at that point, the batteries just didn't perform as they were pitched, and there are warehouses full of these battery tanks, and we're trying to figure out what's a good second life, because they're still perfectly viable batteries, just not for their original intention. So I think one of the major barriers currently, though, is each of the manufacturers of electric buses has a proprietary plug interface. So if New York City Transit or Capital District or any of these authorities were to make that transition, they currently, pending any sort of product development of a dongle or whatever, they are locking themselves into whatever manufacturer they choose. And especially for the smaller agencies that don't have quite as much purchasing power as the New York City Transits of the world, we're working on trying to get some sort of aggregated purchasing programs. But again, I think that it's difficult for them to justify the technology when they can't as easily shift if that's not the one that works out for them.
Building on that comment, China has defined a big deal in this, and we didn't do it. So the Chinese government defined 10 years ago that lithium iron phosphate was the technology of choice because they believed it was safer. That was actually not true, but it drove BYD, the company that Warren Buffett invested in and still holds a sizable stake in, into being a battery company, into being a car manufacturer and a bus manufacturer. I serve as a civil servant. We are in the state of New York, of the state of New York's interface between public and private partnerships, New York BEST. I sit on the board. And we had a demo by BYD not long ago on those buses. So A, the technology is available. B, we can learn from China. They put very strict policy in place, stimulated the markets, and committed to purchase. We can do that here. We can basically be technology agnostic, which from a technology provision is a good idea. Government should really not pick technologies. That's not what government is good at. But government is good at setting goals and visions for targets of emissions or efficiencies, and let the technologists and the innovators and the entrepreneurs basically fill that gap. And I think that's the approach, at least where I'm touching the state, what we're trying to do. And I think that's going to be quite successful, actually.
Maybe.
Yeah, thanks so much for speaking. I have a question about electric vehicles again. I know that the Volkswagen settlement case is going to be pumping a lot of money into this space fairly soon. And I'd just love to hear from all three of you what you think is going to be the major impact of that.
So the Volkswagen settlement has three main components. The biggest chunk of it, obviously, is the vehicle buybacks and rectifying the consumer issues. Then there's Appendix C, which is primarily appendix on appendix. Appendix C, which is primarily for this ZEV zero-emission vehicle. I believe it's $2 billion available across the U.S., with $800 million of that to be spent specifically in California. Go CARB, because they were a co-plaintiff on that. And the other $1.2 billion is kind of up to VW or Electrify America, their subsidiary, how they're going to spend it. So these states, and NYSERDA was part of this process, gave input on where we thought were the quick wins. That amount of money has to be spent over 10 years in 4 30-month investment cycles. So for their first investment cycle, and the plan was released, I think, a week or two ago, not a whole lot of detail in it, but it kind of said, here are the interstates that we want to target and do this sort of corridor planning. And it outlined across, IX, we're going to put 10 chargers or whatever the case is. And also major metro areas where they want to put fast charging. And New York City is on that list. So I think it's safe to say that New York will benefit from this, but it's unclear at this point exactly where, if they're going to try to put clusters of it, make some sort of comprehensive network. More details, I think, are coming on that. Appendix D, which is primarily for the NOx mitigation, one of the eligible items is ZEV infrastructure. And up to 15% of that amount of money could be spent on the charging stations, and the OEMs are very much in support of us building this out, because then people will buy their vehicles. But each state has to designate their beneficiary and develop their plan, and New York is kind of in the stakeholder outreach phase and figuring out of the items that the EPA has said are eligible and up to funding levels, what the New York State plan will look like. But there's a lot of money out there, and I know we'll see some of it go into New York. It's just not clear yet what that's going to look like.
Okay, so yeah.
Well, thank you again. This has been very informative. This is, I think Goetsen touched on this a little bit, but appreciate everyone's opinion. I'm a banker that works in finance in the auto industry. And I think 3 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about technology providers for electric vehicles and also plugging into the grid and having that grid optimization. But now when you go to Detroit, nobody talks about electric vehicles without talking about autonomous vehicle technology. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if in the last year or two, has the research mandate changed a little bit to accommodate for the fact that the vehicle may not be parked and charging the grid because it's going to be used on an autonomous basis, and people are going to have less ownership and more usage of third-party vehicles that are constantly going to be on the road.
I really like this question. Thank you for asking it because I'm from Michigan, so people are doing the autonomous vehicle, crazily there. Yeah. So,
I think it's a classic example of we get so enamored with new ideas, and we overestimate the impact in the short term, and we underestimate the opportunity in the long term. The opportunity to have large battery systems in cars and the energy being personal is potentially transformative. It democratizes energy. I think that will happen. I also think that autonomous drive will happen. I think we'll see a little bit of a different demographic potentially using that, depending on where you live and where you are. And they are not mutually exclusive. I think it's going to take a little bit more time, though. So it looks sexy. It looks easy. It's not so easy.
Yeah, we haven't really looked at autonomous vehicles in our research until now. So yeah, I don't really know.
It's definitely on our radar and part of the kind of mobility management package as a whole. I'm not sure what the implications will be in terms of when you no longer own your own car, if it's just sort of an on-call thing. I have an app and I want a car to come get me and do whatever, and it kind of drives itself over. But I do see that there could be the potential for negative environmental impacts if connected or autonomous vehicles are not electric. I guess pending where your electricity comes from, but if all of a sudden these vehicles are kind of acting as one and can follow more closely and you can get more packed into the existing roadways, if they're not cleaner, if they have emissions, then we're going to see the air quality, particularly in urban areas, suffer as a result. So I think it's one of those things that we kind of, all these things are rapidly changing in their own space, and we acknowledge that there's going to be overlap at some point, but I don't know yet, what that's going to look like.
So can I add something? So as I agree with Robin, I think so autonomous vehicle should be first EV, so that it can be clean, but AV can do something more beyond the EV. So there's a bunch of researchers at the University of Michigan. Actually, they are doing how we can coordinate the car's movement, so that we can increase the capacity and reduce the gap between cars. So then that we can take more advantage of capacity in the road network. And there's one researcher, they are also doing like how we can talk to the AV, talk to the traffic lights when they approach, so that then we can make sure they will, we try to avoid the stop and go movement, and then that will generate less emission. So I think there will be a lot of more potential of AV, but in the first place, it should be an EV first. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for all the questions. Do we have time to have? Okay, great. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Anne. Thank you very much for a wonderful panel. I'm wondering if I can ask each of you on the panel to think a little blue sky and ask of universities what universities can do with their fleets, their buying power, their energy usage to both accelerate some of this, but also to demonstrate the research that's coming out. So any ideas, blue sky ideas that could be put in place by the higher education sector, which has very high energy demands across multiple formats and modes, as we all know.
So I think seeing is believing. If you get to drive an electric car, you probably never want to buy something else. If you get to test and basically fuel for 8 cents instead of $50, that's a big deal. I think the opportunity to try something, especially if you're not in the engineering field where most people are not, it's not that hard, it's pretty cool, and it's very effortless. So those things are interesting. I participated a little bit when MIT, so I sit on the visiting committee for MIT, where we put basically solar panels on campus and we share the data, not unlike what I have on my house. I think that's fairly easy to do, and I think the impact is high. Transparency, basically.
Yeah, so MIT is obviously like full of engineers and people who want to adopt new technologies. So there are lots of previous owners, for example, they talk about their cars. So we see those cars around. Yeah, but for electric vehicles, so I still haven't seen an electric vehicle on campus yet. Maybe I wasn't going around enough, but so one thing MIT is doing right now, so there's so thinking ahead about the energy sources. It's setting up a solar plant in North Carolina. So to offset the energy emissions from fossil fuel use on campus. So yeah, if they bring in electric cars to campus, and if we know that we are buying our electricity, or we are sort of sponsoring this solar plant down in North Carolina, then I guess transportation will also be zero emissions. But yeah, right now I'm not aware of any transportation focused incentives on campus.
So we actually do a lot of work with universities, often in partnership with, maybe the professor has a company, or they're partnering with local stakeholders, the utilities, other state agencies, to demonstrate a lot of these technologies. And I think universities have a lot of power here because they often kind of have their own oversight and own a lot of their own campus roads. So the potential for them to serve as beta testing centers for a lot of this is much higher than some other settings. In terms of greening their own fleet, I know a lot of universities have targeted their shuttle services for this, whether they're electric or alternative fuel. And I think that's where we're going to start to see some of these driverless or autonomous vehicles, particularly if there's preset routes for it. So in terms of the other vehicles that you see on campus, just the professor or the students driving electric vehicles, I'm not sure how much of an impact any sort of policy can have there, because that's a hard thing to actually govern. But the vehicles that they use for maintaining the grounds or transporting students, there is a huge opportunity there, and a lot of schools are already taking that opportunity.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like whether Columbia, because they have also set up shuttle, whether they are energy battery powered. Anyone knows? Yeah, if they are not, probably.
You'll see a green vehicle parked downstairs from this building that's used. It's an electric vehicle that's charges right downstairs.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think, thank you again for joining us. And maybe let's give applause to all the So as I mentioned before, the full video recording will be available on our website. And you can also subscribe our podcast series on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and lots of other platforms. So this is just one of the lots of events we are gonna host in the next few weeks. The upcoming one is called Can Coal Make a Comeback? And if you want to know more detail, please come to our website. And I hope to see you again soon. And again, please join me in thanking all the three speakers for their inspiring talk today. Thank you.
Thank you.